what am I thinking about today?
So last week in Star Wars news, fans were presented with an Entertainment Weekly spread of picks and news regarding the upcoming Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Lots of cool and interesting stuff to be sure, but probably one of the most notable reveals was the official announcement of the Porgs, a species of penguin Furbies that occupy the wildlife of Vakto, the planet Luke Skywalker was hiding on and was seen at the end of The Force Awakens. While it was no surprise that these cute little flipper bunnies were instantly memeable, it's even less of a surprise that they have faced an inevitable backlash. The crux of the criticism being that the inclusion of Porgs is pandering to a younger demographic and to a further extent are a shameless creation to sell toys. Now let's be honest, island hamsters are clearly meant to appeal more to children than exploring the internal struggle of patricidal white privileged Sith boys. And to a certain degree, one can empathize with a fan's hesitation to additions that are allegedly supposed to be kid-friendly. But before you hop on the jaded bandwagon that Disney is trying to just sell you the plushies, I urge you to walk to your shelving unit, take out your Star Wars media, sit it down in front of you, and calmly exclaim, "You are a toy!" The need for fans to ignore that Star Wars has always catered to younger viewers has been a personal irksome issue of mine. To shed some light on my own background with the series, it never occurred to me until around college that anyone had a problem with Ewoks. The everlasting criticism is that they resemble something of a selling out point for Lucas. Star Wars was finally becoming the big franchise that we know it today, and what better way to cash in on those beloved merchandising rights than to make the focal point of your final chapter man-eating forest Care Bears. And I'm not here to definitively say that that wasn't the motivation. The truth is, none of us really know. Ever since Return of the Jedi, there have been nothing but conflicting reports to either prove or dispute this. But for this conversation, it's best to cite the creator himself and a quote that he delivered at this year's Star Wars celebration.
The idea was simply to do a high-adventure film that I loved when I was a kid with meaningful psychological themes. You know, it's hard for people to realize, and I'm not supposed to say this, and I wasn't supposed to say it then, but, you know, it's a film for 12-year-olds.
A quote like this from the OG architect sheds some light on the attitude Star Wars was initially created with, that no matter how much philosophy and meaning we have mined out of Lucas's creation, the series' primary function is to take such concepts and deep lore and present them in a straightforward narrative that at the very least is accessible to children. As such, while the story is earnest, it's not a stretch that it was all created to not be taken that seriously, at least in the strict sense of the word. When it comes down to it, laser swords and a giant ball that can blow up planets and a mob boss who looks like a giant slug is just as silly as teddy bears. I mean, anyone who laments the inclusion of Ewoks over Wookiees is essentially saying that tiny bears are off the table, but give me more of the gargling dogmen. God, just shut up! While I begrudgingly accept that Star Wars constantly gets put on this untouchable sacred pedestal of serious next-level modern cinematic mythology, it puzzles me that something like Ewoks and Porgs continue to be a source of controversy amongst a fanbase, especially one that is otherwise content with engaging with equally fantastical material. Case in point, are we really going to die on the hill that Porgs are being made to sell toys when literally everything seen in this Entertainment Weekly spread is going to be merchandised in some way, shape, or form? Regardless, I think it's said best by director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson, in a Twitter response to an anti-Porg. For me, a big part of why Star Wars engaged me creatively from age 4 to 43 is that it's a world that you could play with. Johnson nails the nature of Star Wars in this response by putting it simply: the franchise caters to kids just as much as adults, and part of the appeal is that it was a universe to be played with. And while the commercialization of Star Wars has often and somewhat fairly been criticized, I would offer the hot take that this type of media is just as valuable, if not more so, as obsessing over canon and the narrative implications of each addition to the franchise. Yes, as a Star Wars fan, I grew up loving the original trilogy and saw the prequels in theaters, but I can't say that I would be nearly as entrenched in Star Wars if it weren't for my Lego speeder bike, my time logged in the Pod Racer video game and Battlefront, or making my R2-D2 toy breakdance, which I just did yesterday, I guess. Which segues into probably my hottest take of the video, that outside of the main films, the biggest influence Star Wars has had on me is Robot Chicken. Yes, you heard me, Star Wars owes much of my love to it due to the Robot Chicken Star Wars specials. In a world where I, a Star Wars fan, quickly became bored of the Clone War era no matter how much it added to the story, entertainment like Robot Chicken and even the Family Guy Star Wars trilogy represented a more intimate connection to the franchise. You see, obsessing over who the Chosen One was or debating the moral spectrum of the Force is mostly a recent phenomenon for me, with a majority of my life enjoying the films as they were, and by extension that meant cracking a few jokes at their expense, taking our action figures and making them do crazy things, pointing out sillier aspects that made us love the movies in spite of them. The idea that Vader would have to call the Emperor to let him know the Death Star blew up was a farcical POV that offered a humorously relatable angle that allowed us to enjoy the series on an equally entertaining level. Hell, Robot Chicken Boba Fett may be the best Boba Fett, not only because he actually does something, but because he caters to all of us thinking that he's cooler than he actually is. His self-hyping over-the-top attitude plays off that very same conceit.
And I was like, you know what, kids? It's been real, Daddy-O, but I'm not giving you the pleasure. So I jumped into the pit myself.
It was entertainment in and of itself, but also didn't add to Star Wars by introducing some new narrative wrinkle, but rather by letting its guard down and acknowledging how much childlike joy the franchise possesses. It was a celebration. A similar distinction is made as to why you're professional to your boss and coworkers but are willing to goof off with those closest to you. You're just as comfortable with taking each other seriously as much as you are pushing each other's buttons. It's a series that embraced that Star Wars was more than serious lore and myths. It was a crate full of goofy playthings. And what was this all done with? Toys. Offering us another level of escape that once again caters to us die-hard fans who would get some of the more in-the-know jokes.
I'll totally check the basement.
Oh no, don't you go in there, girl!
Juxtaposed with the childlike nature of playing with action figures. Side note, Disney and Warner Bros., I'm not sure what you need to do to make it happen, but please give us Lego Movie a Star Wars story. You're basically saying no to money. What I'm ultimately saying is that yes, Star Wars occupies the same zeitgeist space as superheroes, video games, and even wrestling. They are absurd fantasies that entertain the young and whose charm is dependent on your adult sensibilities. Pieces of fiction that have time and time again maintained value by being child-accessible franchises that have maintained longevity not because they cater to you as an older fan, but because they happen to be rich in story. Adult appreciation and child accessibility is not mutually exclusive, a debate that for some reason people haven't learned from Pixar by now. So when it comes to something like the Porgs, I urge all the jaded fans, casual or not, to take a breath and remember what you are watching. You are still going to get an engrossing narrative about the merits of drawing the line between light and dark, but let's keep in mind that a little whimsy has more reason to be in this story about space wizards than a mature thesis statement. So let's stop treating Porgs like it's putting Mogwais in Schindler's List.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching the first episode of my Random Thoughts. I enjoyed putting it together and already started on the next one, so I hope you enjoyed it. But what is that little logo up there that's calling back to that little logo at the start of this video? Well, Random Thought Bubble is simply my new YouTube channel for some new content coming on the horizon. You'll get more episodes of Ethnic Nerd as well as some unannounced things that should be up in the next month or so. So if any of that sounds interesting or at least curious to you, subscribe to the channel. And since things are a little bare bones right now, feel free to click on that bottom link to check out another small channel dedicated to my podcast, The Upside Fans. It's small but fun. And as always, chime in the comments section. I know it can be a scary place, but I like to hear what you guys think. So once again, thank you for watching and stay on the lookout for more Random Thoughts.